Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The shuttle bay smelled like recycled air and rust. Ethan Carver's boots echoed on the metal grating as he moved through the loading dock, checking the manifest on his wrist display. Last transport off station before the repair lockdown. 23 hours until the bay sealed for 6 months. He couldn't afford to miss it. His contract on Meridian Station had ended badly. Accusations he didn't start, a supervisor he'd insulted without meaning to, a reputation that had somehow turned into something uglier in the retelling. The easiest solution was to disappear into the cargo routes. He found the hatch marked with faded numerals. ST-7749. The door was already open, yawning like a hungry mouth. Inside, the cargo hold was dark. His hand found the light switch, but nothing happened. Secondary power only. Fine. He'd seen worse ships. He pulled himself through the hatch and let it slide shut behind him with a soft pneumatic hiss. The darkness swallowed sound. His eyes adjusted slowly. Long shadows stretched across what looked like a medical bay converted into storage. Rows of cryopods lining the walls, their indicator lights long since dimmed. He'd heard rumors about salvage runs to dead sectors. Ships pulled from the void after decades, even centuries, their systems barely functional. This one felt like a tomb, like something that had been sleeping. He took a step forward. The shadows moved. Not the kind of movement that tricks the eye in bad light. The kind where something that was motionless a second ago is suddenly, impossibly facing you. Ethan froze. A sound rose from the darkness. Not mechanical, not the groan of old metal. Human. Female. A whisper that multiplied into dozens of whispers, filling the hold like wind through a canyon. A male, a male, a male. His breath caught in his throat. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts given substance. 24 figures, maybe more, sitting motionless along the curved walls. Blue skin, a deep, impossible blue, the color of depths, of things that lived without sunlight. Their bodies were lean, skeletal, scarred with marks that looked like they'd been cut into their flesh deliberately. Their eyes were what made Ethan's skin go cold. They were alive. All of them, every single one, watching him with an intensity that felt like predatory focus. And their eyes were luminous. A pale, glowing amber that reflected light like a cat's, like something that hunted in the dark. The closest one rose slowly, unsteadily, as if her legs had forgotten how to move. She was tall, taller than Ethan, with sharp features and scar tissue that pulled at one side of her mouth, giving her face a permanent expression of anguish or hunger or something in between. Her hair was white, not gray from age, but white like bleached bone, and it fell in matted strands past her shoulders. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice rough from disuse, each word an effort. "Last of the drift survivors. The last conscious ones." Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward the emergency transmitter in his pocket. She saw the motion. Something flickered in her expression. Not fear, but something sharper. "Don't," she whispered. "That won't help you." "I just walked into the wrong ship," Ethan said, forcing steadiness into his voice that he absolutely did not feel. "I was looking for the cargo shuttle heading to Kepler Station. You walked into our hunger," Lyra interrupted, and the other women shifted forward, a wave of movement that made Ethan's heart spike into his throat. "Men destroyed our world, took what they wanted, left us to die. You came here to finish what they started?" "No, I came here by accident." "There are no accidents," Lyra said. She took a step toward him, unsteady, her legs quivering with effort. "The ship doesn't make mistakes. It brought you here. It's been waiting." The deck beneath Ethan's feet vibrated, just a tremor, subtle, but he felt it resonate up through his bones. Something massive, far below the cargo hold, had moved, had shifted, like something enormous taking a breath after a very long sleep. Lyra's head snapped up, her luminous eyes fixed on the ceiling. In that instant, Ethan saw genuine fear crack across her face, the first unguarded emotion since she'd spoken. "We need to move," she said quietly. "The old systems are starting to wake." Before Ethan could respond, she grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were cold, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who looked like they could snap like bone. She pulled him toward the rear of the cargo hold, away from the entrance, into deeper darkness. The other women rose, following in silence. Their footsteps were nearly soundless, practiced, cautious, the movements of people who had learned to make themselves small. "Where are we going?" Ethan pulled back slightly, resisting. "I need to report this to Station Command. The ship isn't safe. If there are people here..." "There is nowhere safe," Lyra said flatly. "Not anymore. Not for you." The ship lurched. Not a tremor this time. A full shudder that made metal scream in protest. Ethan staggered, crashing against the wall. His shoulder flared with pain. Lyra caught him, steadying him with an arm around his chest. Up close, he could smell her. Salt and something acrid, like machinery run too hot. "How long have you been on this ship?" he asked. "We don't mark time," Lyra said. "We mark cycles. The ship put us into deep sleep when the supplies ran out. Every few years, it woke us for the breeding cycles. We were supposed to be saved. We were supposed to make it to the core worlds and restart civilization." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But the men never came back. The rescue never came. So we just kept sleeping, and waking, and sleeping again. For how long?" She looked at him with those terrible luminous eyes. "We stopped counting after the 400 years. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. "That's not possible." "Not on the worlds you know," Lyra said. "But out here in the drift, time moves differently. Ships drift. People freeze. Systems keep running on half power for centuries, and nobody notices, because nobody's listening." The deck trembled again, heavier, deeper, like something massive turning over in its sleep. Lyra's face drained of color. "The hunger core," she whispered. "It's waking faster now." "What's the hunger core?" "The ship's breeding system," Lyra said. Her fingers dug into Ethan's arm. "When it decides there's a male present, it activates. It's been dormant for centuries waiting, but it doesn't go back to sleep easily." "I'm not staying," Ethan said. He pulled away from her, moving back toward the hatch. "I'm leaving this ship right now. I'll report this to..." The lights exploded on. Not gradually, all at once, emergency klaxons shrieking through the hold, every light shifting to deep red. A robotic voice boomed through speakers, distorted and ancient. "Biopulse detected. Biopulse detected. Selection protocol activated. Male presence confirmed. Male presence confirmed." Ethan spun toward Lyra. "What did you..." "I didn't do anything," she said, and now her voice carried genuine panic. "The core is doing this. It sensed you. It's starting the protocol." From the depths of the ship, something roared. Not mechanical sound. The roar of hydraulics under pressure, of metal screaming against metal, of something vast and hungry waking from a long, long sleep. The floor buckled beneath Ethan's feet. He stumbled, went to one knee. "Move!" Lyra grabbed him again, hauling him to his feet. The women scattered. Not in panic, too organized for that, too practiced, but with the efficiency of people running a practice drill. They poured toward the far end of the cargo hold, toward passages Ethan hadn't noticed in the darkness. Some of them glanced back at him as they ran, not with compassion, with something harder, with hunger of their own. Behind them, the rear wall of the cargo hold began to distort. Something massive was pushing against it from the other side. Something that made the metal buckle and warp like clay. Ethan caught a glimpse of movement in the gap. Metallic limbs, scanning apparatus, the skeletal frame of something that had been built to hunt. "Hunter machines," Lyra spat. "The core built them millennia ago. They're supposed to select one survivor, one woman to breed with. The core keeps the others in reserve." "And the men?" Ethan asked, even though some part of him already knew. "The core was built to eliminate the competition," Lyra said. "Men are a threat to the breeding cycle. Men are always a threat." The hunter machines pulled themselves through the gap in the wall. There were 3 of them, skeletal frames of black metal, 8-legged, each one the size of a horse. They had no eyes, but something on their heads rotated, scanning. Thermal sensors, Ethan realized. They were looking for heat, for heartbeats. One of them locked onto him immediately. Its head snapped toward him with predatory precision. A targeting laser painted a red dot on his chest. "Run!" Lyra shoved him toward a maintenance corridor. "The core tracks biometric signatures. It's locked onto your pulse. If it latches onto you, if it gets close enough to calibrate your biosignature..." A laser cut through the air, where Ethan had been standing a millisecond before. The beam burned a hole through the cargo container behind him, the metal glowing red around the wound. Ethan ran. Lara was beside him, her longer legs eating up the distance, pulling him through the corridor as the hunters scuttled after them, their mechanical legs scratching against the metal floor like the sound of claws on bone. The corridor twisted and descended, taking them deeper into the ship's guts. The walls grew narrower, the air grew colder, emergency lighting flickered overhead, painting everything in staccato bursts of red. Behind them, the hunters' thermal sensors whined, searching, hunting. Ethan's lungs burned. His legs felt like they were going to give out. "How far?" he gasped. "Storage Base 6, Lara said, semi-depressurized. The core can't lock thermal signatures in dead air. The hunters will lose your heat signature." They burst through a bulkhead door. Lara slammed it shut behind them and twisted the manual lock with all her strength. The hunters slammed against the other side, testing it, their sensors screaming in the darkness. The bay beyond was cold. Ethan could see his breath. The air was thin, recycled through broken systems, and it carried the smell of frozen water and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like flesh that had died a very long time ago. "What is that smell?" Ethan wheezed. Lara didn't answer. She was staring at something in the center of the bay. Cryopods, dozens of them, arranged in neat rows like a cemetery. And through the frosted glass of each pod, Ethan could see shapes, bodies, women mostly, but his stomach dropped. There were male bodies too. "The previous cycles," Lara said quietly. "Every time the core woke us for breeding, there was a male, a prisoner, a slave. The core would force the mating, and then..." She gestured helplessly at the pods. "Then the male would die, or the core would kill him, and we would be put back into deep sleep. The survivors among us learned to hide, to pretend to be comatose, to not react when the core activated. Some of us made it through 40 breeding cycles. Some made it through 50. Ethan looked at the bodies in the pods. Some of them had been dead for so long that they were barely human anymore, just withered shapes under frost. Others looked fresher. One looked like he died very recently. "The last one," Lara said, following his gaze. "He didn't want to survive anymore. He refused to eat. He refused to move. The core tried to stimulate him through injection, through neural feed, through every method it had. But he just lay there and died." "How many cycles?" Ethan asked. "We stopped counting," Lara said again. "But looking at this..." She gestured at the rows of bodies. "Maybe 150, maybe 200. We were supposed to be humanity's hope. We were supposed to save the species. Instead, we became this." Her voice cracked. "We became the core's breeding stock, and every man they brought here became the core's victim." The hunters were still slamming against the bulkhead door, but the impacts were slowing, weaker. The cold was interfering with their thermal sensors, making it harder for them to lock onto a target. "We're safe here," Lara said. "For now. The core can't maintain the hunters' systems in this cold. They'll go dormant in a few minutes." Ethan sank to the floor, his back against one of the cryopods. The cold burned against his skin. His breath came in ragged gasps. He was thinking about the man in the pod, the one who'd given up, who'd decided that survival wasn't worth the price anymore. He was thinking about how easy it would be to understand that decision. "What happens now?" he asked. Lara sat down beside him, her breathing finally slowing. In the emergency lighting, her scarred face looked ancient. "Now we wait," she said. "We wait for the core to cycle, for the hunters to power down, for the other women to come back. And then, Lara said quietly, "we figure out how to keep you alive long enough to escape this ship. Because if the core locks onto you, if it completes the mating cycle..." She looked at him with those luminous eyes. "You'll become like him." She gestured toward the pods. Just another body waiting for deep freeze. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were shaking. He forced them still, gripping them together hard enough to hurt. "Why do you care?" he asked. "You don't know me. I'm just some random male who walked into the wrong ship." Lara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took one of his hands, unclenching it, holding it gently in hers. "Because," she said, "in 500 years, you're the first person who didn't try to hurt me on sight. You offered me water, from your own flask. You shared what you had when you could have kept it for yourself. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. That makes you different. That makes you worth saving. Ethan looked at their joined hands. Hers were cold and scarred and covered in marks that told stories of pain he couldn't begin to understand. But her grip was gentle. Real. My name is Ethan, he said. I know, Lara said. Your ID tag says so. I read it when I grabbed your arm. He should have felt violated. Instead, he felt seen, recognized. Like maybe, in this nightmare, he wasn't completely alone. The hunters went quiet. Not powered down exactly, but passive. Their thermal sensors dimmed. The scratching sound of their legs on metal stopped. For the first time since he'd walked into this ship, Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. It was racing like prey, running from a predator. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, in the machinery that had been sleeping for centuries, the hunger core opened something like eyes and began to focus entirely on the one thing it had been designed to find. The last male in its collection. Ethan didn't let go of Lara's hand as the hunters powered down. Even when the emergency lights shifted to a lower frequency, casting the cryo bay in a sickly purple glow, he held on. Her fingers were like ice. His thumb traced the edge of a scar that ran across her knuckles, raised tissue that spoke of violence, of survival against impossible odds. How long until the core tries again? He asked. It won't wait long, Lara said. Now that it knows you're here, it's going to escalate. It'll run patterns, try different protocols, activate different systems. The hunters are just the first line. The core has others. Others! She pulled her hand back slowly, and Ethan felt the loss of her touch like a sudden drop in temperature. Lara stood, moving toward the nearest cryopod, her reflection ghostly in the frosted glass. The ship was built for one purpose: population restoration. That's what they called it in the old broadcasts we've heard. But what it really means is forced breeding at genetic scale. The core doesn't just have hunters, it has medical units, stimulation chambers, genetic sequencers, chemical treatments that can override will and resistance. She turned back to him, and her expression was stone. And it's willing to use all of them. Jesus, Ethan breathed. Your God won't help you here, Lara said, not unkindly. Out in the drift, there's only survival. That's all any of us have ever had. The sound of footsteps echoed through the cryobay, multiple people moving fast but controlled. The other women emerged from the shadows, the ones who'd fled when the hunters activated. There were 16 of them that Ethan could count. They moved with the precision of a military unit, taking positions around the perimeter of the bay, watching the doors and the ventilation shafts with the focus of people who had learned to expect threat from every direction. One of them, younger than Lara, with a missing section of her left ear and scars that pulled her face into a permanent scowl, stepped forward. The hunters are going dormant for cycle reset, she said to Lara. We have maybe 15 minutes before the core tries something else. Did you check the medical corridor? Lara asked. Locked down. Core sealed it when it detected the male. We won't be able to get supplies from there. A third woman, smaller, with arms that looked like they'd been broken and healed multiple times, spoke up. The breeding chamber is powering up. I can hear the cooling systems activating in the subdecks. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Breeding chamber? Lara didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned to address the gathered women. We moved to secondary storage. The core won't lock it down for another 6 cycles. It'll maintain the illusion of free movement to lower his stress levels. If we can reach the communications array before the next hunters activate, we might be able to transmit a distress signal. To who? The woman with the missing ear demanded. There's no one left out here. You know that. We've been broadcasting for decades. No one answers anymore. Then we try the automated repeaters, Lara said. We set it to broadcast on all emergency frequencies and pray that someone somewhere is still listening. And if they are, asked the smaller woman, if someone actually picks up our signal, they'll come here. They'll see what we are, what the core is, and they'll destroy this ship and everything in it, including us. Better destroyed than breeding stock for a machine that stopped caring about our humanity 500 years ago, Lara said flatly. Then she looked at Ethan. Pack what you need. We're moving in 5 minutes. I don't have anything, Ethan said. He stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. I came here with just what I'm wearing. Then you're already packed, Lara said. She moved toward one of the sealed lockers built into the cryobay's wall. Using a manual key that hung from her neck on a piece of frayed cord, she opened it. Inside were clothes, old, worn, but clean. A water bladder, a length of cord, a handheld thermal scanner, its battery indicator flickering weakly. She tossed the clothes at him. Change into these. The medical system uses biotextile scanners. If you're wearing standard issue station clothing, the core can track your position through the fabric sensors. These are old enough that they don't have any electronic components. Ethan changed quickly, stripping off his station gear and pulling on the other's clothes. They were loose on him, designed for smaller frames, and they smelled like salt and something medicinal, like a place where people didn't get to bathe often enough. Drink, Lyra said, handing him a water bladder. The next corridors we're going through have no functioning water recyclers. You might not get another chance. He drank. The water was stale and tasted like metal, but his throat was parched, and it went down like something precious. Tell me what you need from me, Ethan said. I can help. I'm strong. I can carry things. You can stay alive, Lyra interrupted. That's what we need from you. We need you to move fast, stay quiet, and not make any sound that might alert the core to your position. Can you do that? He nodded. Say it, she demanded. Her eyes held his, luminous and unforgiving. I need to hear you say you understand. I understand, Ethan said. I'll stay quiet. I'll move fast. I'll do whatever it takes. Lyra held his gaze for another long moment. Then she turned to address the group. Secondary storage through the maintenance tunnels. Avoid the main corridors. The core can seal those at any time. We use the old passages, the ones built before the core took over the ship systems, the ones it doesn't have full sensor coverage on. What about the mail? The woman with the missing ear asked. What if the core catches us together? What if it tries to take him and we're in the way? Lyra's jaw clenched. Then we do what we've always done, she said quietly. We survive. But her hand found Ethan's in the darkness and squeezed it once before letting go. They moved through the cryobay in formation, the women taking point and rear guard. Ethan kept in the center. The missing ear woman, who Lyra called Kessa, pried open a maintenance hatch in the floor, revealing a shaft that descended into blackness. One by one, they climbed down a rusty ladder, the metal cold and slick under Ethan's hands. The shaft opened into a tunnel barely wide enough for them to move through single file. The air was stale and thick with something that made Ethan's eyes water. They moved by the light of a single thermal torch, old technology, safe from electronic scanning, and the darkness beyond that light felt like it had weight, like it was pressing down on them, trying to force them deeper into the ship. This tunnel was built by the original crew, Lyra whispered, moving just ahead of Ethan, before the core took over navigation. The core doesn't monitor here because it doesn't need to. These passages were designed as emergency routes, and the core determined they would never be needed. That was 500 years ago, Ethan whispered back. Can it adapt? Can it learn that we're using them? Maybe, Lyra said. The core is smart, but it's also locked in old programming. It operates on cycles and protocols that were written when this ship was new. It's not designed to be creative. It's designed to reproduce. Everything else is secondary. Behind them, Ethan could hear the soft padding of the other women's feet on the metal floor, their breathing controlled and quiet. These were people who had learned to move through danger the way fish move through water, with the unconscious grace of pure survival instinct. The tunnel twisted, descended further. Ethan lost all sense of direction and depth. They could have been moving down 3 levels or 30. The only constant was the sound of Lyra's breathing ahead of him and the ever-present thrum of the ship's systems through the metal walls. Finally, the tunnel opened into a larger space. Lyra raised her hand and the entire group went motionless. She played the thermal torch across a room that looked like it had been a crew quarters area. Bunk beds bolted to the walls, lockers, a small table. Everything covered in a layer of dust that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Secondary storage, Lyra announced. Medical supplies are in the sealed lockers. Weapons are in the floor cache. We take only what we can carry and only what we'll need. Kessa moved immediately to the lockers, working the seals with practiced efficiency. The smaller woman, whose name Ethan gathered was Vex, went straight to the floor and began prying up a panel with her fingers. She had incredible strength for someone so slight. The panel came away to reveal a cavity beneath, containing several items wrapped in protective cloth. How often do you come here? Ethan asked. When we have to, Lyra said. She was checking the room's exits, moving methodically from door to door. The core knows these supply caches exist, but it doesn't prioritize monitoring them. As long as we don't make the effort to leave the main ship corridors, it considers us manageable. Manageable, Ethan repeated. You mean as long as you don't try to escape? Exactly, Lyra said. She looked at him, and something sad and ancient flickered across her face. For 500 years, we've been in a stalemate with the core. We stay in designated areas, we don't interfere with the ship's basic systems, and the core leaves us mostly alone. We breed when it demands we breed. We sleep when it demands we sleep. And we pretend that's not a kind of death. Until I walked in, Ethan said. Until you walked in, Lyra confirmed. She reached into one of the lockers and pulled out a medical injector, the kind used for broad-spectrum treatments. She checked the label, nodded to herself, and tucked it into her pocket. You changed the equation. The core wasn't expecting a male. It's not going to settle for stalemate anymore. Kessa handed out packages to the other women. Ethan saw what they were. Ration bars, water purification tablets, thermal regulation packs, and from Vex's cache, weapons. Not guns, the core would track energy signatures from those, but knives and sharpened implements, tools that could do damage with pure mechanical efficiency. We're not going to fight our way out, Lyra said, reading Ethan's expression. These are insurance, last resort. The core controls this ship completely. We fight, we lose. What we're going to do is reach the communications array and send a signal. That's our only play. And if the core intercepts the signal? Ethan asked. Then we're already dead, Lyra said with brutal honesty. So we might as well try. A sound echoed through the walls, not mechanical, but organic. A pulsing, rhythmic thrumming that made the metal of the ship vibrate. Ethan felt it through his bones. Lyra's entire body went rigid. The hunger core, she whispered. It's, calling. Calling what? Ethan asked. Us, Lyra said. She moved to one of the room's portholes and peered through. In the darkness outside, Ethan could see shapes moving. Not the skeletal hunters from before. These were different. These were soft, organic shapes. Biological constructs, part flesh and part machine, drifting through the void between the ship's inner corridors like something between a jellyfish and a satellite. Breeding facilitators, Lyra said, and now her voice carried genuine fear. The core is getting more aggressive. It's bringing in the heavy systems. The thrumming intensified. Every surface on the ship began to vibrate. In the lockers, equipment rattled. In the walls, something screamed. Metal under extreme stress, or maybe something alive. We need to move, Lyra said urgently. We need to reach the communications array before the core seals off the main access points. Kessa, you take point. Vex, your rear guard. Everyone else, we move as one unit. And no matter what happens, you stay together. You separate, you die. The core will hunt you individually. They moved out of the crew quarters back into the main corridor, faster now, Lyra abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, Ethan could hear the sound of systems powering up, of machinery coming to life after centuries of dormancy. The ship was waking up. The hunger core was waking up, and it was done with waiting. The corridor twisted upward. They were climbing through the ship's internal structure, moving toward the upper decks. Ethan's lungs burned. His legs felt like they were going to give out, but Lyra kept pulling him forward, her scarred hand tight around his wrist, and the other women pressed close, their presence a kind of shield against the darkness. A bulkhead door ahead began to close. Kessa didn't slow down. She ran at it full speed and dove through the narrowing gap, rolling on the other side. The rest of them followed, squeezing through as the door descended, metal screaming against metal. Ethan made it through with inches to spare, feeling the hot wind of the closing door brush against his back. On the other side, the women were all breathing hard, all but vibrating with adrenaline. How much further? Ethan managed. 2 more decks, Lyra said. The communications array is in the observation tower. It's one of the oldest systems on the ship, built before the core became self-aware. The core should have minimal control over it. Should have, Vex said, and even through her fear, there was bitter humor in her voice. They climbed a maintenance ladder, pulling themselves upward hand over hand. The rungs were slick, not with water, but with something viscous and warm. Ethan didn't want to think about what, didn't want to know. They emerged into a corridor that was different from the others. Cleaner somehow, with walls that showed signs of actual maintenance. The emergency lighting here was slightly brighter, and through the portholes, Ethan could see the stars. Vast and terrible and beautiful, the drift spread out around them like an ocean of emptiness. "We're close," Lyra said. She was barely breathing hard now, as if fear had burned away her exhaustion. "The observation tower is at the end of this corridor. Once we reach it, we can lock it down and send the signal." She started moving, and the rest of them followed. They'd made it maybe 30 meters when every light on the ship went red. An alarm screamed through the corridors, not a warning, but something worse, something triumphant. A mechanical voice boomed through the speakers. "Male location confirmed. Breeding cycle initiated. Isolation protocol activated. All personnel to designated breeding chambers. Failure to comply will result in forced compliance." The bulkhead doors on either side of the corridor began to descend. Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm and ran, pulling him forward. The other women ran with them, their footsteps pounding on the metal floor like a heartbeat. One of the doors came down too fast. Kessa barely made it through, and the woman behind her, smaller, younger, didn't. The door struck her across the midsection, and she went down hard. Her scream cut short as the door sealed, trapping her on the other side. "No!" Ethan spun around, but Lyra wrenched him forward, dragging him away from the sealed door, away from the woman's muffled screams on the other side. "We can't save her!" Lyra shouted. "If we stop, we all die. We can't leave her. She's already gone." Lyra's face was a mask of anguish and fury and desperation. "The core has her now. If we go back, it takes us too. Everyone dies. Is that what you want?" The observation tower loomed ahead. The final door was already closing. Lyra put on a final burst of speed and threw herself through the opening, dragging Ethan with her. The door sealed behind them with a bang of finality. They were inside. The observation tower was small, cramped, filled with ancient equipment that glowed with faint status lights. And through the portholes, Ethan could see the entire universe. The ship's trajectory marked out in faint red lines. The nearest settlement visible as a pale dot of artificial light 50 million kilometers away. Lyra was already moving toward the communications console, her hands flying across the controls. Some of them lit up at her touch. Others remained dark, unresponsive. "It's been too long," she muttered. "The power coupling's offline. We need to reroute through the emergency systems." "There's no time," Kessa said, pointing back at the door. Through the small porthole, they could see movement. The breeding facilitators gathering on the other side. Their soft, gelatinous bodies pressed against the door, testing it, looking for a way through. "I know there's no time," Lyra snapped. Her fingers were shaking as she worked the console. "That's why I'm going faster." Something crashed against the door. The breeding facilitators were trying to force their way through, their bodies impacting the metal with sickening wet sounds. The console sparked. A light flared green. "We're live," Lyra breathed. "We're actually live. Oh my God, we're..." She reached toward the transmit button, and the Hunger Core's voice filled the observation tower, not through the speakers, but through the walls themselves, vibrating through every piece of equipment, through the very structure of the ship. "Lyra, you betray your purpose." Lyra's hand froze inches from the transmit button. "The male is for reproduction. You are for reproduction. This is your function, your only function." "No," Lyra whispered. "No, that's not all we are. That's not all I am." The door shook. The breeding facilitators were getting inside, their bodies beginning to squeeze through the gaps around the frame. "Transmit!" Vex screamed. "Lyra, transmit now!" Lyra slammed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every light on the console flared bright. The building hummed with power, and out into the void, traveling at light speed, a distress signal screamed across the drift. "Ship, seek 7749 to any receiving station. We are alive. We are trapped. We need help. This is not a rescue operation. This is a liberation. We are alive. We are alive. We are alive." The Hunger Core shrieked. It was the only word Ethan had for the sound, a shriek of rage and hunger and violation, a machine scream that made his teeth ache and his vision blur with pain. The breeding facilitators poured through the door. Ethan moved without thinking. He picked up a piece of the console, heavy, metallic, sharp, and threw it at the nearest one. It connected, knocking the creature aside. The facilitators screamed, pulling back, and for just a moment, they stopped advancing. "The escape pods!" Lyra was shouting. "The tower has independent escape pod access. It's in the lower section." They ran. The breeding facilitators followed, their bodies writhing, extending appendages that looked disturbingly like reaching hands. Ethan could smell them now, something like ozone and rotting fruit, like a machine's idea of what life should smell like. There was a hatch in the floor. Lyra wrenched it open. Below, visible in the emergency lighting, was a small chamber with 3 objects that looked like metal coffins. "Escape pods," Lyra confirmed. "They're pre-programmed to eject toward the nearest station. We can be out of this ship in seconds." "What about the others?" Ethan asked. "The women we left behind?" Lyra looked back at him, and her luminous eyes held all the weight of 500 years of impossible choices. "They'll come after us," she said, "or they'll stay and endure. But I can't save them all. I can only save you. I can only save myself. And maybe that's enough." Kessa and Vex were already moving toward the pods. The breeding facilitators were forcing their way into the tower. More of them. An endless stream of soft, pulsing bodies. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm. "Come with me," he said. "I'll share a pod. 2 of us can fit in one." She looked at him, and something flickered in her expression. Something like hope, or maybe like the memory of what hope had felt like. "No," she said quietly. "I need to do something first." She pulled away from him and walked back toward the console. Her fingers flew across the controls. Another sequence of codes. The observation tower's emergency systems began to shut down. Not just the lights, the life support, the gravity generators, everything. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded. "Making sure the core can't use this tower again?" Lyra said. She looked at him with those terrible luminous eyes. "Making sure that next time, if there is a next time, whoever comes here has a fighting chance." The breeding facilitators were nearly through now. Ethan could see their shapes coalescing into something larger, something that might have been the core's attempt at a true physical body. Lyra moved back toward him, pulled him into her arms. Her embrace was fierce, desperate, and for just a moment, Ethan felt something like belonging in the grip of this woman he'd known for barely an hour. "Get in the pod," she whispered against his ear. "Transmit the signal when you reach a station. Tell them what this core is. Tell them how to destroy it. Can you do that?" "Come with me," Ethan said again. "Please." "I am," Lyra said. She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "I'm coming with you, just not in the same way." She pushed him toward the nearest pod. Ethan stumbled into it, his protest dying in his throat. Lyra was already moving toward Kessa and Vex, helping them into their pods. "Close the hatches," she shouted. Ethan fumbled with the seals and the pod hissed shut around him. Through the small porthole, he could see into the tower. The breeding facilitators were forming a wall, blocking the exit, cutting off any possible retreat. And Lyra stepped up to a control panel and entered a final sequence of codes. The observation tower's explosive bolts detonated. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the tower began to separate from the ship's main structure. The bulkhead doors slammed shut, sealing the tower off. And in that same instant, the escape pods fired their separation charges. Ethan felt the acceleration press him back against the pod's interior. The ship fell away below him, and above him was nothing but infinite emptiness and the distant pale dot of the nearest station. Through the porthole, he could see the observation tower, still connected to the main ship by just the narrowest of bridges, the old-style manual connection that hadn't been updated in 500 years. And in the tower's viewports, he could see shadows. Movement. Lyra and the core's breeding facilitators locked together as the tower began to separate completely. The manual connection stretched, metal screaming in protest, and then it snapped. The observation tower drifted away from the ship, moving in a different trajectory, pulled by different gravity wells. Ethan pressed his face against the porthole, trying to see, but the distance was growing too fast, the darkness too vast. The tower disappeared into the black. The ship ST-7749 shrank to a point of light and then vanished entirely. Ethan was alone in the pod, hurtling through the void toward the distant station. The navigation computer announced arrival in approximately 47 hours. He curled up in the small space, his body racked with shaking he couldn't control. He had survived. Lyra hadn't. The pod's communication system crackled to life as it descended toward the station. Controllers wanted status updates, medical information, authentication codes. Ethan gave them everything they asked for, but the words felt like they came from someone else's mouth, like he was watching himself from outside his own body. When the pod finally docked, they found him catatonic. The medical teams took him immediately to the isolation ward, checking him for contamination, for infection, for any sign of the drift's unknown pathogens. He cooperated with every test, answered every question, but something inside him had hollowed out. In his dreams, when he finally slept, he kept seeing those luminous eyes, kept hearing that voice saying, "You boarded the wrong ship, but maybe you were the right mistake this dead world needed." 2 weeks later, officials from the Planetary Defense Authority sat across from him in an interrogation room that tried very hard to be comfortable and failed completely. They wanted to know everything. Everything about the ship, about the women, about the Hunger Core, about the breeding cycle and the purpose code, and the 500 years of survival. "There's no way to verify any of this," the lead investigator said. Her name was Director Chen, and she had the tired eyes of someone who'd heard 1,000 lies. "You're the only surviving witness. The escape pods for the other women came back empty." "They didn't make it," Ethan said. His voice had become flat, emotionless. "It was easier that way. The pod I was in might have been damaged at launch. I saw their pods separate, but the tower was already deorbiting. The secondary impacts might have compromised." "Or," Chen interrupted, "you ejected the others to ensure you had resources?" Ethan didn't respond. What was the point? His and Lyra's actions didn't matter to these people. Only the data mattered. Only whether the story could be verified. "The distress signal your ship transmitted," Chen continued, "we've been tracking its propagation. You sent out a repeating message at multispectrum frequencies. That was very clever, very intentional." "That wasn't me," Ethan said. "That was Lyra, the last surviving Women's Council leader. She programmed it." "And where is Lyra now?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "Dead," he said. "She vented the observation tower to destroy the breeding facilitators. She sacrificed herself so I could escape." Chen leaned back in her chair. "A noble death," she said carefully, "but a death that leaves us with some significant problems. We don't have verification of this ship's location. We don't have access to its systems. We have one survivor, yourself, with a story about a 500-year-old breeding machine that should have been decommissioned decades ago." "I can provide coordinates," Ethan said. "The pod's navigation system recorded them. I can draw you a map of the ship's internal structure. I can describe the breeding facilitators," Chen said, reading from a file. "Organic machine hybrids designed to artificially induce parturition." "Yes, we got that from your initial debriefing." She stood up and walked to the door. "Thank you, Mr. Carver. That will be all for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow. We have a lot more to discuss about your experience." But it was clear she didn't believe him. None of them believed him. They thought he was a liar, or delusional, or both. They thought he'd made up an elaborate fiction to explain some mundane disaster that had somehow stranded him in an escape pod. They didn't believe because they couldn't believe. The implications were too vast. If what he was saying was true, then there were other ships out there. Other versions of the Hunger Core. Other women or men or whatever the Core had decided to breed. Trapped in cycles of reproduction and sleep for centuries uncounted. The Authority had signed on to this mission to suppress impossible information, to make it go away. Over the next 3 months, Ethan watched as they buried his story. The coordinates he provided led nowhere. The ship had drifted further in the interim, pulled by stellar winds and gravity wells. The distress signal, when they analyzed it, contained corrupted data sections that seemed to indicate a software malfunction rather than an intentional transmission. The escape pods that had come back empty were presumed lost due to re-entry failure. And Ethan, certified as mentally sound by the psychiatric boards, was quietly offered a significant financial settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. He took it. He had no choice. Lyra had died so he could carry this information to the world, and the world had decided it was more convenient if he stayed silent. He was sitting in his new residential quarter, in a different city on the station, trying to figure out how to spend the rest of a life that didn't feel entirely real anymore, when the message came through. It was routed through 17 different proxy servers, crypted with a cipher that Ethan didn't recognize, but somehow understood anyway. A message that shouldn't have been possible. From a dead woman, 500 years old, who had sent him out into the void so that one of them might survive. The message was short. The tower didn't deorbit. I didn't die. The core is still searching, and now it's searching while fully awake. The authority knows what I am, what this threat represents. That's why they're silencing you. They want to use the core's breeding cycles for their own purposes. By the time you see this, the authority has already dispatched its own ship. They're going to try to reprogram the core. They're going to fail. And when they do, this system will have the worst biological weapon ever created descending on civilian populations. You have one chance to stop this. One chance to finish what we started. The coordinates are encoded below. Come alone, come armed. Come ready to do what needs to be done. Ethan stared at the message. It was impossible. Lyra should be dead. Should be drifting in the observation tower, her body already beginning to decay in the vacuum of space. But then he realized something. In the rush to escape, in the chaos and fear, he'd never actually seen Lyra die. He'd only assumed she had, based on distance and circumstance, and the reasonable belief that no one could survive the separation of an observation tower from the main ship. What if she hadn't? What if the tower was equipped with emergency life support systems? What if... He cut off the thought. Speculation was useless. What mattered was the choice in front of him. He could stay in his comfortable apartment, take the authorities' money, spend the rest of his life knowing that he'd failed the one person who had treated him as something more than a predator. He could let the core reproduce, let it spread, let it create whatever horrors a machine with 500 years of accumulated hunger could dream up. Or he could go back. Ethan looked at the message one more time, memorizing the coordinates. Then he deleted it, making sure to wipe all traces of the transmission from his system. He packed a bag with what money he had left. He made arrangements with a cargo hauler, a different ship, different route, no questions asked. And 3 days later, he was back in the drift. The ship was different when he found it. Scarred, damaged. There were blast marks on the hull, and the life support systems were barely functional. But it was still there, and it was still broadcasting. Still alive. The access hatch opened at Ethan's approach. Lyra was waiting for him inside, a thermal weapon in her scarred hands and luminous eyes that glowed with something like recognition. Or maybe like the dawning of a plan that had always known it would end here. "You came," she said. "I came," Ethan confirmed. She smiled, a terrible, beautiful expression on that scarred face. "Good," she said, "because the authorities' ship just arrived. And they're about to learn why you don't try to reprogram something that was already designed to be predatory 500 years ago." The hunger core roared to life, and in the observation tower where Lyra had sent the message, equipment began to boot up. Equipment designed not for breeding, but for something worse. And Ethan, who had boarded the wrong ship and walked into a nightmare he could never have imagined, finally understood why Lyra had kept him alive. He was the only human who could navigate the boundary between machine and humanity. The only one who could reach the core and make it understand that some lives were worth preserving, even in the infinite hunger of the drift. He descended into the ship's depths with Lyra beside him, and the hunger core watched them come with an ancient, terrible satisfaction. Behind them, the authorities' ship was docking. The final cycle was beginning.